Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome everyone to a brand new explainer. Today we're taking this incredibly fascinating journey into something you interact with literally every single day, even if you don't realize it. We're looking at the foundational frameworks that actually shape human behavior, our morals, and honestly, our entire shared reality. Think of it like peeking under the hood of human culture to look directly at its source code. We're going to examine a brilliant piece of academic analysis that unpacks exactly how traditional narratives are continuously shaping our modern world. So, I want you to ask yourself, when you hear the words myth or folktale, what comes to mind? You probably picture, I don't know, a children's book or maybe folks gathered around an ancient campfire. But what if I told you these stories are actually society's hidden operating system? No way, right? But far from being just mere entertainment or dusty historical artifacts, the research we're analyzing today argues that these narratives act as a massive cultural force. They literally have the power to arrange social life into a moral order. They're the exact mechanisms we use to define good versus evil, fairness, and trust. Here is the map of our mythical journey today. 1. Decoding cultural source code. 2. Tricksters and false alarms. 3. Stepmothers and the marabouts. 4. The hero and the witch. And 5. Morals for a modern world. Section 1. Decoding cultural source code. Let's start by establishing our framework. How do we actually analyze a story to reveal its hidden societal function? Well, we need the right set of tools. To decode these stories, the researchers utilized the semiotic theory of French philosopher Roland Barthes. Now, don't let that academic terminology intimidate you. Think of this as our cultural detective's magnifying glass. Barthes argued that myth is essentially a form of speech. It's a mode of communication. He proposed that myth operates on what he called a second-order semiological system. Basically, what that means is that a myth takes something that already has a literal meaning, like a word, an animal, a character, and hollows it out. It turns it into an empty vessel. And then that empty vessel is filled right back up with a brand new, culturally specific ideological meaning. Think of it kind of like peeling an onion. On the first layer, the first-order signification, you just have the literal story. A hare is just a small furry animal. A hyena is just a predator. But on the second-order signification, the mythical level, those characters become powerful concepts. The literal sign gets distanced from its original meaning and gets totally infused with the morals, the values, and the philosophies of the society that's telling the tale. The animal becomes a living, breathing moral lesson. Section 2. Tricksters and false alarms. Armed with our framework, let's look at our first case study from Gambian folklore, which explores the tension between individual selfishness and community trust. All right, let's break down the famous Gambian tale of the hyena and the hare. In this story, these two animals are traveling to visit their father-in-law. The hare, acting as the ultimate trickster, strategically swaps the hyena's high-quality rice, which, by the way, was meant as a really respectful gift, with his own low-quality rice. The hare does this purely to win the position of the favored son-in-law. So, on the second order of meaning, the hare represents selfish individualism, while the hyena represents the naive dupe who blindly trusts his friend in what absolutely should be a cooperative relationship. So, the absolutely crucial point here is what this specific betrayal signifies to the culture. You see, in Gambian society, the relationship with one's father-in-law is deeply sacred. By sabotaging his friend to gain favor, the hare isn't just playing a prank. He's actively usurping a sacred alliance. His trickery is the exact polar opposite of the African ideal of communality. This ancient tale serves as a complex, very real cultural warning. It reminds society that while we might be kind of amused by a trickster's cunning, deceptive individualism destroys sacred social ties. We have to remain wary, even of those we consider friends, because double standards and deceit are profound threats to the community as a whole. To show you just how timeless this source code is, let's look at a thoroughly modern equivalent, the cry wolf effect. The source material draws a direct, almost shocking line between the breakdown of trust caused by tricksters and game-theoretic studies on modern evacuations. When individuals or systems repeatedly issue false alarms, essentially acting as tricksters, it creates a modern dupe out of the public. Because false alarms are becoming increasingly common, there's actually a measurable declining compliance when actual critical evacuation orders are made. Just like the hare destroying his friendship with the hyena, modern trickery and false alarms completely erode the foundational communal trust required to keep a society safe. Section 3. Stepmothers and the Marabouts.
Let's move to the next section and see how this builds when we leave the animal kingdom and look at intense human family dynamics. Every single society experiences dark, uncomfortable emotions that are frankly hard to talk about openly. We're talking things like maternal bile, jealousy, and fierce competition for resources within a blended family. So, how does a culture safely process these taboo resentments? Well, they use the second order signification of myth to create therapeutic narratives.
This brings us to the Gambian tale of the two half-sisters. When Pate's first wife dies, leaving his daughter Mai Bintu orphaned, he brings home a second wife, Kajatu. Now, Kajatu brings her own daughter, who is incredibly also named Mai and is practically identical to her new stepsister. The identical names and appearances are this beautiful metaphorical representation of the moral principle of equality. It's the cultural ideal that a parent must nourish and nurture offspring equally. But Kajatu immediately adopts the mythic role of the evil stepmother. She hatches this cruel plan to get rid of her stepdaughter in favor of her biological child, completely ignoring the cultural demand for fairness. To execute her plan, the stepmother Khadijatu visits a figure known as Ephra, a fortune teller or a marabout. The researchers connect the marabout to psychoanalyst Carl Jung's archetype of the wise old man. This is a figure residing in the collective human unconscious who possesses deep mystical power, knowledge, and wisdom, usually offering guidance to those in need. But remember, Roland Barthes' theory from earlier, mythical forms can be ambiguous. While Ephra initially gives wise counsel on how to nurture a stepdaughter, he actually ends up facilitating the stepmother's terrible plan to distinguish between the two identical girls. The morabout dithers between good and evil. In this tale, he represents a remarkably dark, cynical mysticism. Through his actions, he aids in the complete disintegration of the sacred filial bonds holding the family together. It's a really stark cultural reflection on how spiritual power, when it's corrupted by jealousy and prejudice, becomes a real menace that destroys innocent lives. Section 4. The Hero and the Witch. This leads us to our final narrative arc, which deals with the most fundamental societal conflict of all, the ultimate defeat of evil by the divine. Enter Lolly the Witch. In Gambian folklore, just like in so many global narratives, the witch is a cross-cultural figure representing absolute immorality. Lolly is this pretentious, morally repugnant character who uses her dark magic to literally devour the men who wish to marry her daughters. She is the total embodiment of a persistent malice that threatens the very survival and continuation of the community itself. Now, what's incredibly fascinating is the hero who stands up to her, Bain Jugup. Born with the power to transform himself, he steps up to save his brothers in society by pushing Lolly the Witch into a pit of fire. And get this, the researchers draw a fascinating direct parallel between this ancient Gambian hero and a modern American myth, the Batman. Actually, Jugup is a Wolof noun that literally translates to bat. Just like the Batman, who was initiated into his calling by bats, Bain Jugup gives his life to something way bigger than himself. Both figures transcend ordinary achievement, dedicating themselves to fighting crime and evil to protect society. Bain Jugup's victory isn't just some basic lesson against doing bad things. It's a vital, symbolic expression of the inevitable conquest of good over evil. This traditional symbolism perfectly encapsulates how culture is studied and understood. These aren't just characters, they are symbolic vessels crafted over generations. Whether we're talking about animal figures like the hare, or human archetypes like the witch and the hero, these forms are absolutely essential tools for a community to navigate the absolute conundrum of social existence. Section 5. Morals for a Modern World. As we wrap up our analysis, we have to ask, what does this all mean for us today, in an era dominated by science, technology, and rapidly shifting global culture? The core takeaway from this research is the enduring, unyielding power of myth. Despite all our modern advancements, these narratives remain profoundly influential. They don't merely reflect the past, they actively operate as a cultural compass right now. By taking literal signs and infusing them with second-order ideological meanings, stories continue to instill the vital moral concepts of justice, fairness, equality, and honesty. They nurture social cohesion, and they inspire the compassion that's basically required for any society to function. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. We've seen how a Gambian tale about a hare dictates community trust, and how a story of a bat hero defines the ultimate defeat of evil. The source code is always running in the background. So look closely at the stories you consume today, the news you read, the heroes you admire. What modern myths are currently pulling your strings? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the narratives around you.